The world of Illuvium has a bunch of awesome creatures known as Illuvials. However, with there being so many, they're all kind of thrown at you at once, and you don't want to risk putting in time into Illuvials that you're just not going to use. So here today, I'm going to try and help you with this. When you're first starting out in the Illuvium Arena, what are my top 5 Illuvials that you should level up first? My number 5 pick is Archos. Archos is the evolution of Archie the turtle, but Archos is basically the staple to a corner composition. Its Omega is a AoE heal, so healing everything all around it, and is very good at stopping those little stray hits that the back line of your corner composition might get. It heals those up very, very well, while also rooting everything around it enemy-wise. So if somebody dives on top of you, Archos is there to save you. So it's an absolute staple for the corner comps, but it does also open up other play styles thanks to its Aegis trait. Once Archie evolves into Archos, Aegis becomes available, and what that basically means is that the Archos and then other Aegis units will share some of its stats, its attack damage, attack speed, and some of its tankiness over to the closest ally. So if you happen to have an Aegis Ranger and then a Archos, you can both buff the exact same character to play a protect the carry kind of style, or put it into a tank to make a tank that just feels unkillable, or spread it out and just spread the stats across multiple Illuvials. There's a handful of ways to play this, and essentially none of them truly feel wrong. It's a very flexible team composition, and essentially a must-have regardless of what kind of playstyle you're going for. So that's why Archos is number 5 on my list, and you can get an Archos for like 7 cents right now, so it's super cheap. If you do end up enjoying the playstyle with Aegis in particular, there is a way that you can push forward with it as well, with a tier 3 sometime down the line. You would be looking into Blotto. Blotto is a very, very strong tank that synergizes with the wildfire side of Illuvium, and it's also an Aegis unit. So in the best case scenario, you can have the Blotto, Archos, and your Ranger all pumping stats into either each other or a different Illuvial. Number 4 on my list is going to be the Cuculus. Cuculus is a melee support Illuvial that has a ton of utility. It has easily one of, if not the longest, stun in the game, while also being relatively tanky as well. And when you, of course, evolve Kuka into Cuculus, that is where the Enchanter playstyle then becomes available, which if you ever were in Illuvium Arena and you've seen the pink flashes underneath your opponent's Illuvials or something along those lines, that's the Enchanter buff, which basically is doing damage to everything around it while also healing the Illuvial ever so slightly. So if you end up getting the Cuculus, which again is a tier 1 unit, very easy to find, you can immediately add Enchanter into your playstyle, or just completely forget Enchanter, just grab Cuculus. It's a fantastic support unit, and it's oftentimes splashed into many teams just for the sake of that massive stun. So that's why it's number 4 for me, because I'm never upset to have a Cuculus onto my team. It just brings so much to the table. So whether I'm going for Enchanter or not, I'll gladly accept it. If you do actually really like the Enchanter playstyle, sometime down the road, you can absolutely push it further as well. There is the Fennec Fox line, or Gazatep in particular. That's a tier 3 fully evolved Illuvial, but it does also have Enchanter attached to it. And just having more Enchanters on the field means you're getting more heals and damage out that much quicker, because it comes out every single time an Omega is thrown from an Enchanter. So if that's a playstyle you like, heck yeah. But again, Cuculus by itself is just fine. And you can get the Cuculus right now off the Illuvidex for about 6 cents. Number 3 on my list is the Greater Monk Gear. So the Monk Gear is your big fist fighter in the Earth side of things. Again, this is a tier 1. So again, very easy, very inexpensive to try and find as well. It has no Omega, it just slugs. It just wails on its opponent with a little bit of additional splash every couple of attacks. But the big thing why I say the Greater Monk Gear in particular is because when it turns into the Greater Monk Gear, that's when Berserker comes online. Berserker in a tier 1 is a very big power spike if your Ranger happens to have a fighter weapon as well. And there are a lot of them. There are many ways that you can play Berserker early to get a massive power spike and be able to really put the hurt onto your opponents, if not win a lot of rounds, thanks to that Monk here staying alive. And it also makes it so that your Ranger turns into a little bit of a carry as well, with it also being the Berserker. Berserker, for those that aren't unaware, the more your Berserker can auto attack, the more damage and healing it will do to itself. allowing for that melee fist fighter to actually sustain in battle. And the nice thing about Monk Gear as well, it's a great pivot point. There is no specific team composition that you have to go just because you're leveling up a Monk Gear. There are a variety of different fighter builds. If you enjoy the Berserker playstyle, you can pick up a Rip Lance, for example, but you could potentially even spin off into a Templar-based style with Riley and Fur Knight. Or you can just play fighters en masse and just flood the board with a bunch of fist fighters that just do a ton of damage and hit very, very quickly. That's why I like Monk Gear, because while it itself is a fantastic early game carry, it also allows you to pivot into some later ones later on in your Illuvium Arena career. And with that, again, the Greater Monk Gear is a tier 1 unit, so it is rather common, and you can find one on the Illuvidex right now for 8 cents. Number 2 on my list is the Axon. Axon is the middle stage evolution of Atlas the Axolotl, and it's the only tank I'm going to put onto this list, but it's for a good reason. Again, similar to the rest of my list so far, this has all been a bunch of tier 1s. Similar thing here with the Axon. It's not rare at all. But the Axon's main ability when it charges up its Omega is to pop out a shield, and when that shield takes enough damage, it then explodes and deals damage to everything around it. So Axon not only enjoys tanky stats, but it does also like a bunch of Omega power as well. And again, a beautiful thing about Axon is when you do evolve it from Atlas into the Axon, you then get the Harbinger trait. Harbinger is arguably one of the best traits, at least as the recording of this video, because what ends up happening is the lower your Harbinger units get, so the Axon in this instance, the lower the Axon gets, the more tankiness it gets, the more resistances it gets, but it also gets more Omega power. So those shields get bigger, those shields burst harder, while your Axon also becomes harder to kill. It is a fantastic early game tank. If you can get Axon out in the early game, that tank will do you wonders. And then once you have Axon, of course, you can pivot into a handful of different play styles. Is Axon just going to be the tank while you pivot to a completely different team composition? You could do that. You could focus onto a heavy 8 water style where the Axon is going to be one of your main tanks. Or maybe you enjoy that Harbinger style where you're getting low but then getting stronger. You enjoy that kind of play style so much, like many of us do currently in Illuvium Arena, to the point where you want to pair it up with the Mammoth. If you can get that fully evolved Mammoth, that is another Harbinger unit, and that thing has a ton of damage for a tank. But do note that is a tier 4 fully evolved Illuvial, so that is much harder to find, but the potential could still be there. Now, of everything on my list, Axon is probably the most expensive Illuvial I have on it. However, it is still just 19 cents to grab as of right now from the Illuvidex. Honorable mention before we go to my number 1 pick is going to be the Stabbin. This is the only tier 3 I'm going to have on this list, but it's only an honorable mention because it does pigeonhole you a little bit into the rogue playstyle. Stabbin is probably one of the most cost-effective hyper carries in the game, since once it goes from slapping into stabbing, you get the Vanguard trait. Vanguard is absolutely ridiculous, especially right now, because every time your stabbing lands a crit, the next shot that it does will do damage based off of your target's max health. So even though it's an assassin, it can still destroy tanks very, very well. And I'm not even talking about the slash and the fully evolved evolution. I'm talking about just the middle stage evolution. Pound for pound, probably one of the best Illuvials in the game, but again, only if you enjoy the assassin or the rogue playstyle. If you do enjoy that rogue playstyle, there are a bunch of rogues as well that you can absolutely pick up, even a handful of tier 1s that are extremely common that you can pair alongside your stabbin so that it's hitting those crits much better. And then if you can manage to find a Malura, that is the other Vanguard that stabbin loves to pair up with. It's a rogue, but it's a tank at the same time, and it can really up the damage on your entire rogue team if you manage to get that combo. Stabbin you can pick up right now for about 9 cents on the Illuvidex. Now, my number 1 pick for an Illuvial that you must be leveling up right here, right now, is so important that I actually recommend you level 2 of them, and that is going to be the Baby Lynx. The Baby Lynx is really interesting because it doesn't actually attach itself into any synergy whatsoever. But what it lacks in terms of late game team building, it absolutely excels in for early game dominance. I've been playing, watching, and commentating professional and top level Illuvium Arena for the longest time. And with that, for as long as I've been doing this, the best strategy to do in the game in the very, very early stages, when you're, say, level 4, level 5, get yourself 2 lynxes on the board while you're building up the rest of your team. Those two Lynxes can be the absolute powerhouses needed to win those early rounds. It's almost a must in competitive Illuvium. And why is that? Well, basically, the Lynx is surprisingly tanky. It's also just a tier 2, so it's not too hard to find. And its Omega is incredible. When the Lynx charges up its Omega, it takes 3 slashes at its opponent, and it's doing a large chunk of pure damage every single time. Pure damage, of course, does not get affected by any of the resistances or defenses that your opponent happens to have. So the Lynxes, especially if you get 2 of them onto the same target, can absolutely delete opponents' Illuvials. Now, when you're getting into the later game, that power will fall off. That single target burst damage does not compare to some of the other Illuvials out there. But then you just sell them and make room for the rest of the team that you've been building, or if you're feeling particularly risky, you can try and evolve those Lynxes into its middle and final evolution forms. But do note that Lynx is a very, very unusual Illuvial because the middle stage evolution and the final stage evolution are generated randomly at the start of the battle. You very well might not get the Lynxes that you like. So that's why at least a lot of players, they'll take the 2 baby Lynxes and they'll completely forget about the middle stage evolution and the final stage evolution. Just stick to the baby ones. And even though it's a popular Illuvial and a competitive Illuvial, there are an absolute abundance of Lynxes out there in the Illuvium ecosystem, to the point where you can still get an entry-level Lynx at about 9 cents. It's still very, very cheap. But that'll wrap up my list, my top Illuvials that I think you should be leveling immediately once starting Illuvium Arena. If this video helped you at all, it would mean the world to me if you could drop a subscription here onto the channel and like the video. I'm trying my best here to build up this channel strictly off of Illuvium content and helping players of all skill levels get their footing into what is a very, very tough game in Illuvium Arena, but very rewarding once you actually get your footing. I do also stream multiple times per week here on YouTube as well, games across all of the Illuvium community, not just Arena, but it's Illuvium one way or another. And if you happen to be new to the Illuvium Arena, I also recommend you check out my Illuvium Arena House League that I hold every Friday. It is a free-to-enter event where I take players based off of their collection level and skill level and try to put them into lobbies where it's as close as possible, with the goal being growing your collection. Get Illuvials just by playing the game through House League. But if that's something that's interesting to you, I would love to see it come on out again. Give it a shot. It's for free, and you can grow your team completely free to play. If you do wish to go the extra mile and support me personally a little bit and the events that I run, one way that you can do that is through the Illuvidex. I do have a referral code that can be used. My code is silent. You can put it into the top right-hand corner of your Illuvidex profile. When you purchase fuel to, say, go for the auto drone run and get Illuvials, I do get a small kickback, which then goes into supporting myself as well as the events that I run. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Illuvials themselves in Illuvium Arena, I do happen to have an entire guide right over here that goes over every single Omega, every ability that the Illuvials have, so you can get a little bit of a better understanding of what you're seeing out there in the Illuvium Arena.